Some places were never meant to be watched from above. Tonight, we're climbing into the loneliest towers in Appalachia, where what looks in isn't always human. If you love horror, hit like. It helps this story reach more fans like you. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. Every viewer is part of my horror family, and don't forget to subscribe. Your support keeps these terrifying stories burning through the dark. I wasn't looking for trouble when I took the job. Honestly, I was trying to get away from it. The divorce had just finalized. My dad passed the year before that. I'd been living in Asheville, bouncing between contract gigs, and sleeping too little, drinking too much. I needed something quiet, isolated, something with no emails, no phone calls, and no one asking me to explain myself. So when the Forestry Service posted an opening for a seasonal lookout on Craggy Pinnacle, just east of the Blue Ridge Parkway, I applied the same day, didn't even think twice. The tower was remote, miles from anything but trail and trees. No overnight campers allowed, no roads that went all the way up. You hiked in with a pack, and you stayed until your shift was up. Just you, a cot, a propane stove, and radio check-ins twice a day. It sounded perfect. The tower itself was about 30 feet up, steel-framed, barely holding together, but the view was endless. Layers upon layers of ridgelines folding into each other like waves, especially at dawn. You could see the whole bowl of land beneath the tower, miles in every direction, crags, hollows, thickets. One of the rangers called it the God Seat, said you'd never feel bigger and smaller at the same time, and for the first 2 weeks, it really was peaceful, boring even. I made coffee, logged cloud cover, jotted down bird sightings, radioed weather conditions twice a day. Nights were quiet, wind in the beams, no light pollution. I even started sketching again, something I hadn't done in years. But then came the smoke. It started on a Tuesday, just after 6 p.m. I remember because I'd just made tea and settled in with a notebook when I spotted it, a thin pale plume rising out of a hollow due north, just past the tree line where the land dips. At first I figured it was a hiker's illegal campfire. Maybe someone got lost and tried to wait it out. But the next map check showed no trail access to that spot. None, not even an old logging road. I radioed it in, logged the coordinates, and the response came back casual, probably a lightning strike or old burn flare-up. Just keep an eye on it. By the time the sun dropped behind the ridge, the smoke was gone. Next night, same thing, 6:17 p.m., same hollow, same thin curl of smoke, almost white against the evening light. Only this time I watched it longer. It didn't move, no breeze touched it, like it rose through the trees, and just stopped. By the third night, I hiked down. I started early in the afternoon, packing light. It wasn't far, maybe a 2.5-mile descent, if you cut through the overgrown switchbacks. I marked trees as I went, kept a compass, took GPS snapshots every half mile. The hollow was quiet when I reached it. No bird song, no insects, just this odd stillness, like the woods were listening. There was no smoke, no fire, nothing scorched, but the clearing at the center of the hollow was strange. Just ash-covered soil in a perfect circle, maybe 30 feet wide. Not burned leaves or logs, just fine gray-white dust, like something had burned from below, and bones, small ones, snapped, hollowed out, strewn like someone had tossed them there one by one. Rabbit, maybe, a fox skull. I even found a bird's femur still bearing a strip of dried sinew. I backed out fast, didn't touch anything, didn't speak. My ears were ringing the whole hike back up, though I hadn't heard a sound. That night, the wind didn't blow. The air inside the tower felt too still, too close, and at exactly 6:17 p.m., I saw the smoke again. Only this time, it wasn't rising from the hollow, it was rising from the base of the tower. At first I thought it was fog, mountain mist swirling up from the woods below, but no, it was coming straight up through the gaps in the floorboards, pale and curling. I backed into the corner, heart pounding so hard I thought it'd shatter the windows. I checked the trapdoor, still latched. I grabbed the flashlight, opened it, empty. No fire, no heat, but the floor beneath me was warm, too warm. The planks were dry, brittle, flaking into gray specks like ash. I didn't sleep that night, just sat with my boots on, waiting for dawn. The forestry office brushed it off. Could have been steam off the rock. Tower's been known to hold heat from the sun. They offered to rotate me out, but I declined. I don't know why. Pride, maybe. Or maybe I was afraid someone else might see what I saw, but I stayed. The fourth night, I hiked down again. This time I brought a shovel. The ash ring was still there, bones too, but something had changed. The center of the circle was disturbed, like something had burrowed up, not in, but out. I dug, carefully, slowly. 6 inches down I struck something solid, not stone, not root, metal. I cleared the soil. It was a rusted iron grate, square like the kind you'd see in a cellar. Beneath it, nothing but blackness. I thought I heard wind down there at first, but it wasn't wind. It was breathing, low, slow, rhythmic, as if something deep beneath the earth was sleeping. I covered it back up, didn't hike back down after that, but the smoke kept coming, every night. 6:17 p.m., always the same, sometimes from the hollow, sometimes from below the tower. Once I saw it rise behind me, inside the tower, just a momentary curl near the stove, vanishing before I could blink. And then came the voices, soft at first, like whispers rising through the floorboards. Then one night, clear as day, "Don't leave again." It was a woman's voice, familiar, but I couldn't place it. Calm, flat, like someone talking in their sleep. I tried to respond. "Who's there?" I asked aloud, heart in my throat. The reply came in a child's voice. "You came back, just like before." I left the tower at dawn, didn't radio in, just hiked out, and didn't stop walking until I hit the ranger station. They told me I was dehydrated, sleep deprived. The tower was old, the altitude messes with you, and when I insisted they check the hollow, they sent 2 interns who came back claiming they found nothing, just brush and dirt. I quit the next day, but here's the thing, I never told them where the hollow was. I never gave coordinates after that first report, and the only way to reach it is by cutting through unmarked terrain. So how did they know where to look? I don't know what's down there. I don't want to know, but sometimes, especially around sunset, I still smell smoke, and every now and then when I dream, I'm back in that tower, and the floor is warm, and something beneath me is breathing. I was only supposed to be filling in 1 month, maybe 2, a temp gig in the Blue Ridge, while the main guy was out on medical leave. Easy money, quiet hours, and a view people pay thousands to glimpse for 5 minutes. My station was an old fire tower, just south of Paint Rock, not far from the Tennessee line, not on the map anymore, technically decommissioned, but the Forestry Service kept it functional for redundancy, just in case something sparked in the Pisgah. I'd been with the department 5 years, mostly doing maintenance patrol in the Smokies. I'm not military, not special ops, just someone who liked trees more than people. I knew how to patch gear, hike double time, and stay quiet on the radio. That's all they wanted. The tower was simple, steel frame, narrow ladder, a 12x12 platform cabin with a desk, a cot, a stove, and a 2-way radio mounted to the wall. No cell service, no Wi-Fi, just ridge after ridge of silence and sky. They gave me a topo map, a basic logbook, and a warning: don't waste your time trying to raise Tower 9. I raised an eyebrow. Why not? The guy looked at me for a second too long, then shrugged. Radio's been weird for years, ever since the ranger up there jumped. I thought he was messing with me, trying to spook the new guy, but he didn't crack a smile. Name was Merle, he added. Never found his body, just his hat, and his boots, neatly placed at the edge. I didn't ask more. I figured every region had its local ghost story, and this was mine, but I logged a note in my head anyway. Tower 9, =, ghost signal. The first week was uneventful. I woke at dawn, brewed gritty coffee, logged weather patterns, watched hawks and fog move like spirits through the hollows. At night, I'd read or sketch in a battered notebook, listening to wind creak the frame, peaceful, lonely, but not the bad kind. The weirdness started on day 9. I'd just finished dinner, canned chili, and a few crackers, when the radio hissed, Tower 9, reporting, coordinates, flat, slow, mechanical, like a man reading from a script he barely understood. At first I assumed it was static, or bleed over from another ranger's call, but the voice was too clear, the frequency was wrong, and it repeated, exact same tone, same pace, 35.192, 72.408, fire risk moderate. I grabbed my map, traced the numbers. They landed near a bend in the French Broad River, an unmarked patch just past the old paint rock trailhead. It was close, maybe a 90-minute hike. I thought about calling it in, but who would I tell? The frequency wasn't even supposed to be live, so I marked the spot, figured maybe someone was pranking me. I could check it out tomorrow, just a hike. But that night, I couldn't sleep. The wind had died completely. The woods were silent in a way that felt wrong, like sound had been scooped out of the air, and the radio kept crackling. Never more words, just soft static at intervals, like something was waiting. I left just after sunrise. The trail was overgrown, barely there. Ferns brushed my legs. Spider webs strung between trees caught the morning light like silver thread. Everything smelled wet and old, moss, bark, leaf rot. By the time I reached the coordinates, I was sweating hard. My calves burned. The area was flat and open, oddly cleared. No structures, no path in or out. But right at the center, something waited. A ranger's hat, dusty, faded, sitting neatly atop a fallen log, and beside it, a tree stump, worn smooth. Someone had carved a name into it. My name, in block letters, sharp lines, and underneath, another line, 9/18, tomorrow's date. I stood there frozen, breath shaking, took out my phone to snap a picture, but of course there was no signal. Camera app wouldn't open, just a black screen, glitched. Something rustled behind me. I turned fast, but nothing moved. Nothing should have been that close. The air felt too heavy. I grabbed the hat and left. I didn't look back. Back at the tower, I placed the hat on the desk and stared at it for over an hour. It was real. Canvas brim, forestry badge, initials burned into the inside rim, ML Merle Lane. I didn't sleep that night, either. The next day, the radio went dead. No weather feed, no hourly updates, just silence. Then at 6:49 p.m., it came back on Tower 9, reporting 34.910, different coordinates this time. I didn't check them, I just turned off the radio, or tried to. The switch didn't respond. I unplugged the power, still it hissed. I wrapped the whole thing in a wool blanket and shoved it under the cot. It kept whispering through the night. Tower 9, reporting. I started seeing things the following day. A man, just at the edge of the clearing below the tower, tall, thin, dark uniform, face in shadow. Every time I brought the binoculars to my eyes, he was gone. By day 14, I stopped logging reports. I stopped cooking, stopped hiking down to refill the water. I just sat near the ladder with my boots on, waiting. For what? I couldn't say. The morning of the 18th, the date carved into the stump, I woke up shivering, even though it was warm. The tower smelled like ash, like wet charcoal, and burnt cloth. The hat was gone. I searched the entire platform, nothing. Then I heard the voice again, but not through the radio. Check the stump. I don't remember climbing down. I just remember the crunch of gravel under my boots, the sound of wind in the trees, but only above me, like it wasn't allowed to touch the ground. The stump was waiting. The name was still there. My name, still fresh. But the date had changed. 9/19, today. And something else was beneath the carving now. Smaller letters, harder to make out. It read, Second Tower. You were always the second. I ran, didn't pack, didn't log out. I just ran, until the woods felt real again, until I hit the edge of a paved road, and flagged down the passing truck. The forestry office claimed they never sent me to Tower 9, said it had been decommissioned for over 10 years, said no one had used that frequency since Mole Lane went missing in 2012. They accused me of trespassing on federal land. I showed them the map they gave me, marked, highlighted. They confiscated it, told me I'd been hallucinating, that the hat was probably planted, that I was under stress, maybe dehydrated. But here's the thing, when I got home, I unpacked my bag. The hat was inside, folded neatly, inside the brim, my initials, not Mole's, mine, and the carving knife I never brought with me, and a crumpled weather-stained page torn from a logbook. It read, Tower 9, new assignment, same voice, same name, repeating. I haven't gone back to the woods since. I moved to Ohio, took a job in the warehouse, flat land, concrete, but sometimes, when the wind cuts just right, I swear I hear it again. Tower 9, reporting. And once, just once, I woke to the smell of smoke, and my boots placed neatly by the window, like someone was waiting for me to go back, like they knew I was the second tower, and the last. I'm not trying to scare anyone. I don't want attention, and I'm not looking for sympathy, but if you're ever assigned to fire lookout, Tower 87, in the Monongahela backcountry, near the Virginia line, and the job starts on a Wednesday, say no. I was 35 when I took the position. I'd just come off a long run of trail work in the Rockies, high-altitude fencing, prescribed burns, avalanche risk zones, the kind of stuff you do when you're still young enough to think bone-deep exhaustion is a badge of honor. But then came the back injury. Nothing dramatic, just a slow slip of cartilage, live 5S1, chronic pain, permanent lifting restriction. So when the Forest Service offered me a solo post in Appalachia, sitting in a tower, with nothing to lift heavier than a radio mic, I said yes. They told me Tower 87 had been decommissioned years ago, and was only reactivated seasonally, when the fire risk spiked. It stood in a stretch of high ridgeline forest south of Seneca Rocks, no trail access, just a supply drop every 10 days via mule. I didn't care. The view was spectacular, the pay was decent, and after years of bunkhouses and chain-smoking trail bosses, the idea of real solitude was a gift. It took 3 hours to hike in. The tower was steel-framed, 30 feet up, bolted into a granite spine, one narrow stairway, one padlocked door at the top. Cabin was tight but livable, propane stove, cot, radio set, observation gear. First 20 days were peaceful, just fog and wind and trees, ridge after ridge, like ocean waves frozen in green. A few smoke columns, easily triangulated, couple of storms, normal stuff. But on day 21, I saw someone moving at the base of the tower. At first I thought it was an early supply run, a figure, just at the edge of the clearing, circling the base, not approaching, not waving, just walking, slowly, clockwise. I called down, no response, flashed my light, nothing. By the time I grabbed the binoculars, they were gone. I chalked it up to fatigue. You can lose your bearings fast when the only voice you hear for 3 weeks is your own. Then 2 nights later, I heard the first breath. I'd just turned in, wind was up, making the old steel joints hum, and then, under that hum, something lower, rhythmic, breathing, heavy, directly behind the steel door, the same door I'd padlocked from the inside. I froze, waited, didn't move, didn't breathe. The sound went on for maybe 20 seconds, then stopped. I stayed in the cot with the headlamp on the whole night. Next morning, I climbed down with the hatchet, thinking maybe a bear had figured out the stairs somehow, but there were no prints, no scratch marks, nothing disturbed, just a ring of disturbed leaves around the tower, a narrow path, maybe 6 inches wide, worn into a perfect circle, like someone had walked it, over and over. That's when I checked the incident log. It was in the bottom drawer of the radio desk, yellowed pages, barely legible pencil. I flipped through past fire sightings, weather notes, equipment repairs, and then I found it. Day 28. Someone's down there again, not sure if it's the same one. Doesn't wave, doesn't answer, just walks the circle. Day 29. Heard the breathing again. This time it knew my name. Page after page, different handwriting, different years, but always the same timeline. Whoever was assigned Tower 87 vanished on day 30 or 31. Gear left behind, radio dead, door still locked from the inside. I was on day 29. I tried to call it in, but the tower radio was just static, not broken, just interfered with, and my satellite emergency beacon, dead, not low battery, dead. The storm rolled in that night, the kind that crawls up from the hollows and sits on your chest. Around 2 a.m., I was woken by a loud clank on the stairs, then another, then silence. I crept to the window and angled the flashlight down. Nothing. Then I swung it across the tree line and froze. Every tree, for 100 yards, was gone. The landscape looked wrong, like a burned field, ash gray, but I hadn't seen or smelled fire. And at the far end of the clearing, standing upright like a person, was a tree, just one, thin, leafless, human-sized, arms or branches, extended toward the sky, no face, no features, but it was watching me. I blinked, and just like that, the forest was back, every tree, every shadow, as if nothing had changed, except the circle around the base. It was wider now, darker, like it had soaked something in. The next morning, I decided I wasn't going to wait around for day 30. I packed a day bag, water, flare gun, compass, pistol, and left the tower, locked it behind me, headed west, toward the ridgeline trail that ran above Trout Run Hollow. I hiked for an hour, then 2, then 4, but every trail marker I passed said the same thing. Tower 87, 1.5 miles, always 1.5 miles. I never got further. I tried changing directions, no difference. Finally, just past sunset, I found a cairn I knew I hadn't seen before. Flat stones, piled neatly, 5 high. On the middle stone, in charcoal or soot, someone had written, "You were never alone." That night in the tower was the longest of my life. The circle around the base had turned black, not dirt, not ash, something other, like a burn mark on reality. Every hour or so I'd hear the stairs creak, but no one ever knocked, and the breathing came back, right up against the door. But this time, it wasn't angry. It sounded sad, like someone mourning, and just before dawn, I heard a voice whisper, clear as if it were inches from my ear, "Day 30, we remember you now." I don't remember leaving. I woke up face down in the middle of the access road, 20 miles from the tower. My day pack was gone, so was the flare gun, the pistol, the compass. But in my shirt pocket was the incident log, every page, rewritten in my own handwriting. Every day accounted for, including day 30. The last line said, "If they circled the tower, you've already been chosen." I resigned that week, moved out west, swore off fire towers, swore off deep woods, started sleeping with a light on, something I hadn't done since I was a kid. People say maybe it was a breakdown, isolation-induced psychosis, sleep deprivation, maybe. But I still have that logbook, and sometimes, just before sleep, I hear steel stairs creak in a pattern that doesn't belong in my house. Sometimes I wake up and find ash circles in the yard, nothing burned, just perfect, silent rings. And sometimes I catch myself counting the days again. I've told this story only once, and even then, I left parts out. People like the easy version. They hear Mining Ridge, Old Tower whispers on the radio, and they assume I was tired, stressed, maybe hallucinating, and maybe I was. But the thing is, I was trained for that. I'd been with the National Forest Service, going on 8 years, mostly fire tower rotations, quiet postings, seasonal work in places most people can't even find on a map. I liked that. The solitude, the clarity, In late August of 2011, I was assigned to a place called Ash Ridge Tower, deep in the hills of Western Virginia, about 15 miles southeast of Hazy, near the state line. They didn't tell me much, just that the tower overlooked a long-abandoned coal mining strip called Harrow's Mouth, and it was mostly a formality, one last rotation before the tower got retired for good. The hike in was steep, not brutal, just long. The path hadn't been maintained in years. The air changed as I climbed, got cooler, wetter, smelled like rust and sweet decay, that late summer Appalachian mix of damp moss, old bark, and distant wood smoke. I reached the tower by early evening. It was smaller than most, maybe 25 feet tall, steel stairs, wood frame, interior cabin barely 10 by 10, cot, propane stove, radio desk, logbook, no power, no plumbing, no distractions, just me and the ridge. The view though, it was stunning. Harrow's Mouth spread out below like a torn scar in the forest. You could still see the cut lines from the old coal pits, half swallowed by green over the decades. I logged my check-in, got settled, and that first night, everything felt normal. It was the mornings that started to feel wrong. On my third day, I woke up around 4:30, not to my alarm, but to movement, crunching, boots on gravel. Down below, just outside the tower, I stood up slow, keeping quiet, pulled the curtain back just an inch, and I saw them, footsteps, circling the base. No person, no light, just the distinct sound of someone walking, pacing, slow and deliberate, in a perfect loop. I called out, silence. I flicked the flashlight down through the trapdoor grating. The noise stopped, but no response, no figure, just empty ground. By the time I got dressed and went down the stairs, the clearing was dead quiet. The only sign was a faint ring in the gravel, almost like the stone had been compacted by heavy boots worn thin. I tried brushing it off, maybe an animal or sound echo from further down the slope, but it kept happening, every morning, always before dawn. Crunch, 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 slow, steady circles, always the same rhythm, never speeding up, never stopping, until I moved. On the 6th day, I radioed it in, described it like a possible trespasser, said I wasn't in danger, just unsure. The reply was static, then a weak, garbled voice, then nothing. I tried again. The static returned, thicker, heavier, almost vibrating, and underneath it, I swear I heard something that didn't belong. A voice, not over the radio, inside it, low, hoarse, whispering, "You're next." After that, I started keeping the pistol on my belt. Forest policy says to keep it stowed unless threatened, but this felt like a different kind of threat, something not interested in rules. Day 9, I found something new. Down by the base of the stairs, tucked behind the foundation post, was a single worn leather boot print, small, too small for a man. I followed the direction it pointed. 10 yards into the brush, I found a trail, not a path, a line, like something had been dragged, not fresh, not bloody, but unsettling. It led toward one of the old coal cuts. I didn't follow it. I'd done enough backcountry rescue work to know when my instincts were screaming to stop. I climbed back into the tower and locked the hatch. That night, the whisper came again, not over the radio this time, not even from the stairs, from directly beneath the cabin floor, like someone pressed their mouth to the wood and whispered through the grain, "We remember you." I didn't sleep. Around 3 a.m., I found the old incident logs. Most towers have them, rotating entries from previous workers, observations, maintenance notes, weather reports. Ash Ridge's log was sparse, barely 10 pages, but the last entry wasn't written in pen. It was scratched in, right into the inside cover, deep enough to splinter the backing. "She walks before the dawn. Don't watch her. Don't speak. If you answer, she marks you." The next morning, I broke protocol, packed my gear, hiked out, left a note at the desk saying I had sudden illness. No way was I spending another night there, except the trail didn't match my map. I walked for nearly 3 hours, and came back to the tower from the opposite direction. I tried again, same result. The forest had shifted, or I couldn't tell anymore. I stayed locked in that tower for the next 36 hours. No sleep, no food. I'd lost track of time completely. And then, just before dawn on day 12, the steps came again. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Then the creak of steel. The first stair, then the second, third, each one deliberate. I aimed the pistol at the trapdoor, called out warnings, shouted. No response. Then silence, and then the whisper from inside the cabin, this time just inches from my ear. You were born of her blood. I don't remember much after that, just flashes, smoke under the door, a shadow that didn't match the room, a face pressed to the window, not threatening, just sad, like it pitied me, like it had waited a long time for me to come back. When the search team found me, I was on the trail 2 miles out, barefoot and mumbling. They said I must have walked out on my own sometime the previous night. I hadn't radioed, I hadn't logged anything, but the pistol was missing, so was the incident book. The only thing I still had was my pocket knife, and when they took it off me, the handle had been carved with 5 strange marks I'd never seen before. Vertical lines, like tally marks, or warnings. I spent 3 weeks on medical leave after that. Then I quit the service. I don't hike anymore. I don't camp. I don't climb. I moved out of the hills and back into town, and I keep the lights on at night, even when I sleep. But sometimes, when I'm up before dawn, I hear boots on gravel, circling, waiting, and I swear, if I don't look, they keep moving. But if I listen too long, I can still hear her whisper. My Uncle Harold Grissom manned the fire tower at Elkhorn Ridge for just over 20 years, never missed a season, never called out. He was the type of man who didn't say much unless he had something to say. Tobacco-stained fingers, hands like bark, never married, lived alone in a modest cabin outside Jenkins, Kentucky, just off Route 805. Every spring, he'd hike up the ridge and take the post. Every fall, he'd come back a little thinner, a little quieter. Folks around here thought of him like a stubborn tree, rooted and weathered, and always standing. When he passed in 2020, it wasn't fire or wolves, or some backwoods accident, like people used to joke about. It was a stroke, fast, quiet, alone in his chair. The radio still on. I was the one who found him, and I was the one who packed up his place. The cabin smelled like ash and old paper, stacks of books, folded maps, a beat-up cot. The living room was wall-to-wall shelves, all of them filled with composition journals, dozens of them, maybe 100. They were labeled by year, neatly, 1 per season, just dates on the spine. Spring 2001, fall 2008. Summer 2016, most of them were normal, daily logs, weather notes, smoke sightings, memos to himself, musings, nothing strange, until I got to the back corner, buried behind a stack of old topo maps. Inside a warped coffee tin was one journal with no date on the cover, just a single word scratched into the cardboard. Before, when I opened it, I felt something odd in my stomach, like a drop, or a lurch. Like when an elevator stops too fast. The first 20 pages were blank. Then came a phrase, over and over, hundreds of times, all in my uncle's sharp, slanted handwriting. It's not the fire you should watch for, it's what walks ahead of it. Written over and over again, like a warning, like a prayer. Some entries were shakier than others. One had been smudged so badly, I couldn't read it. Almost like someone had dragged their fingers through the ink while it was wet. The last page stopped me cold. There was no writing, just a single charred fingerprint, blackened, clear, pressed dead center into the page. It was my fingerprint. Now, I know what you're thinking. That can't be possible. But I had it checked, not formally, just by a friend of mine who works security. He confirmed it. The ridge pattern matched my right index finger. The heat damage made it hard to say more, but it was definitely mine, except I'd never touched that page before, never even seen that notebook. until the day my uncle died. I tried to forget it, chalked it up to grief, stress, trauma, but about a month later, I started dreaming about the ridge. Not memories, dreams, detailed, vivid. I could hear the dry wind in the pines. I could feel the sway of the tower beneath my boots. Sometimes I'd hear the wind shift, and then there'd be a sound like boots on scorched leaves, always before the fireline appeared. Eventually, I went back up. I told myself it was for closure, to spread some of my uncle's ashes, to say goodbye to the place he loved. The trail was mostly intact, overgrown in spots, but walkable. By the time I reached the tower, the sun was dipping. The shadows on Elkhorn Ridge are different, longer, thinner, like they reach for things. The tower creaked as I climbed. The trap door had rusted, but it gave way. Inside, everything was still there. Binoculars, stove, chair, radio, a single mug sitting on the windowsill, and another journal, smaller this time, laying open. One line written, "You already know." I didn't sleep. At 3:14 a.m., the radio crackled. I hadn't touched it, hadn't turned the dial, but it came alive on its own, hissing static, then faint breathing, like someone leaning too close, then a voice, dry, rasping, barely audible. "Fire starts at Pike Hollow, but the walking has begun." The signal cut, just dead air. I don't remember grabbing my pack. I don't remember climbing down, but by the time I hit the trail, I could see the distant glow of firelight in the trees, and I could hear footsteps ahead of it. It wasn't one person, it was many, but not voices, not laughter, just walking, like a procession, marching through the trees in silence. No lights, no smell, just the sound of dry boots on forest floor. I stood still, hidden behind a cluster of stones, and I swear to you, I saw something pass between the trees that had no face, just blackened skin and eyes like wet coal. And as it passed, every tree nearby bent away from it. Not the wind, not an illusion. The forest was afraid of it. I left Kentucky the next day, didn't speak to anyone, didn't tell a soul, but the dreams didn't stop, and that burnt fingerprint, it's still on that page. I've shown it to others. No one has a good explanation. Sometimes I think my uncle knew I'd come looking, that he left those warnings for me, because whatever walks ahead of the fire, it remembers blood, it remembers family. The last thing I'll say is this. A few months ago, I got a letter. No return address, no postmark, just an envelope, yellowed, and smelling faintly of smoke. Inside was a single sheet of paper. On it, handwritten in that same slanted script, was one sentence: "It's at your door now." No signature, but taped to the bottom corner was a tiny piece of charred bark. I was posted up at Laurel Lookout for one winter. Just one. It was a fire watch tower in southern West Virginia, up in the Tug Fork region near the border with Kentucky, elevation just shy of 4,000 feet. Closest town was War, maybe an hour's hike in good weather, which winter rarely gave you. Technically, the tower had been decommissioned a decade ago, but with the drought that year, and the increase in off-grid campers, the Forestry Service reopened a few of the high-risk sites temporarily. I was one of 5 volunteers rotated through the ridge towers. Everyone got 8 weeks. Mine was the dead of winter, early January, through the end of February. I accepted without hesitation. I was 38 at the time, divorced, no kids, no social life to speak of. I'd worked trails and timberlines most of my adult life. The solitude didn't bother me. I welcomed it. The tower itself was old but sturdy. Laurel Lookout stood on a knuckled rise of shale and pine, about 2 miles off a disused ranger road. 30 feet up, single room, metal roof that clicked like a Geiger counter during sleet storms. Inside, cot, propane heater, stove, field radio, and a steel desk with a logbook. Nothing fancy, nothing new, but it worked. The clearing beneath the tower was roughly circular, maybe 40 feet across, ringed by tall black gum and hemlock. Beyond that, Appalachian forest as far as you could see. Dense, shadowed, older than history. I settled into a rhythm. Wake before sunrise, log weather conditions, scan for smoke, take notes, make coffee, read, think. Once a week, a snowcat would drop supplies at a trail cache 2 ridges east. Other than that, it was just me, the cold and the trees. At first it felt almost peaceful. The first sign that something was off came around mid-January. I'd gotten in the habit of sketching the clearing, just something to do. I'd sit at the desk, look out the window, and draw the tree line as it looked from each side of the cabin. It became a ritual. Wake up, make coffee, check for prints in the snow below, and update the sketch. And that's when I noticed it. The trees were closer, not all at once, not dramatically, but over a week's time. The ring had shifted, tightened. At first I thought I'd just drawn the original wrong, but I hadn't. The line I'd sketched on day 3 showed a clear distance of 15 to 20 feet between the nearest tree and the base of the tower. By day 10, that gap had narrowed by at least 4 feet. I measured it, twice. Now snow can trick the eye. Shadows drift piles. It plays games with perspective. I told myself that. But each day, when I updated the sketch, the perimeter crept in. Slow, deliberate, like breath fogging a mirror. I radioed it in, half as a joke. Said, "The trees are on the move. Might need to thin the ranks." The reply was static. Then a voice I didn't recognize came through. "How far have they come?" I laughed, thinking it was just someone playing along. But the tone didn't match the words. It wasn't friendly. I asked who was on the line. Nothing but static. The next morning, I went down with a measuring tape and notepad, walked the circle, measured distances from the tower to the 3 nearest trees, marked them on the trunks with charcoal, came back up, logged it. That night I barely slept. I could hear the wind moving through the canopy, but underneath it there was something else, a low creaking, like wood under pressure, groaning in intervals, not the usual sway of trunks, more like effort. And in the middle of the night, just past 2 a.m., I felt something I can't explain. The tower shifted, just slightly, not a full lurch, but enough for the cot legs to scrape the floor, enough for the stove to rattle. I sat up, turned on the lamp, and saw movement at the edge of the clearing. I didn't see a figure, not exactly. It was more like a thinning of the air, a suggestion of shape in the spaces between trees. I told myself it was fog, or exhaustion, or both. But when I checked the base the next morning, the charcoal marks had moved. All 3 trees were at least a foot closer. The snow between them was undisturbed. No tracks, no drag marks, no wind damage, just clean snow, and trees that had relocated themselves. By February, the clearing had shrunk by nearly half. I stopped sketching, stopped measuring. It didn't matter anymore. The pattern was obvious. The direction was obvious. Whatever this was, it was coming for the tower, for me. I tried leaving. I packed a sled with supplies, strapped on snowshoes, and started toward the eastern drop point. But the trail was gone. Not blocked, not snowed over. Gone. Where there should have been a switchback, there was now a wall of trees, denser than I remembered, grown tight together. No passage. I turned south, aiming for the creek bed. Same result. The forest folded inward like a throat closing. I tried the fire road. Same again. I was boxed in, and the box was shrinking. The radio went next. At first it just crackled. Then the dial light flickered. Then it cut out entirely. When I tried to call for evac, all I got was faint static, and a single word, whispered between pulses: "Stay." By mid-February, the first tree touched the base of the tower. A tall black gum, same one I'd marked on day 10. Its bark had changed, split, warped, shaped in unnatural ways, looked almost like folds of muscle, or knuckles, and on the upper trunk, about 10 feet off the ground, a pattern had emerged. Not a face, but something close, hollows where eyes might go, a twist in the bark that resembled a jaw. It was watching me. That night, I nailed the hatch shut, turned off the lamp, sat in the corner with the axe in my lap, and waited for dawn. But dawn didn't come. The sky lightened, yes, but the sun never rose above the tree line, because the trees now were the tree line. The clearing was gone. I'm not sure what happened after that. There's a stretch of time I can't account for. The next memory I have is of crawling through brittle brush down by Route 16, covered in soot and pine needles. My hands were bleeding. My boots were gone. A ranger found me half-conscious near Horsepen. I was hospitalized for 4 days with exposure and dehydration. They asked how I got out. I couldn't answer. When they hiked back up to the tower, they found the structure intact. But there was no clearing anymore. No circle. No perimeter. just a ring of trees grown so tightly around the base that the metal legs had warped, and carved into one of the trunks in clean blocky letters was my name. I don't take forestry jobs anymore. Moved to a lowland town. Work in archives now. Indoors. Safe. I don't go near pine stands. I don't draw trees. And I sure as hell don't hike alone. But some nights, if I'm walking home late, I hear it again. That soft creak of wood shifting weight. And sometimes, I find a pine cone on my porch. Fresh. Sticky with sap. From a species that doesn't grow anywhere near this county. I was working fire investigation and wilderness response down in southeastern Kentucky when I got the call. It was early November 2019, cold already, enough that frost stuck to the leaves past noon. They said someone had reported strange lights up by Crandall Tower, just north of Harlan County, on a slope overlooking Martin's Fork Lake. That tower hadn't been active in years, not since a rock slide took out the old fire road. No power lines ran to it anymore, no service route, no generator, just 4 miles of uphill switchbacks, through woods most people didn't go into unless they were lost or hunting. I almost didn't take the call, but I was 2 counties over, and I knew the terrain. Besides, Crandall Tower had a bit of a reputation, not just for the usual backwoods ghost stories, something older, wilder. Locals didn't hike that ridge, called it Whistler's Brow, said it sank when you weren't looking. Whatever that meant. I parked at the old gate, around 4 p.m., just before sunset, hiked in with a thermal scope, headlamp, handheld radio, and a sidearm, standard protocol. The trail was worse than I remembered. Fallen limbs, black mud that sucked at my boots. Everything was still, not quiet, still. You know how a forest usually has noise, even if it's subtle, wind, branches creaking, birds flitting around. Something always moving. There was none of that, just a kind of heavy silence, like the air was waiting for something. I reached the tower just before full dark. It looked mostly intact. Rusted frame, narrow steps coated in lichen. The cabin above leaned slightly west, like a tired man resting his weight. And then I saw the lights. Every bulb in the tower's upper windows, on, soft yellow glow, flickering, like old tungsten filaments. But there shouldn't have been power. No lines. No generator hum, nothing. I stood there for a good minute just staring, trying to explain it. Then I climbed. Inside, the cabin was warm, not cozy, just wrongly warm, like a room that had been recently occupied. The space was almost clean, dust in the corners, but the center of the room looked swept. Chair pulled out slightly from the desk, coffee mug sitting empty, but upright. The fire log was open, and the pen beside it was still wet, fresh. I stepped closer, and that's when my stomach dropped. The last entry was dated that night. Same date, same time, we're not alone, and signed, with my name, in my handwriting. I stood there frozen, my radio buzzed on my belt. I jumped hard enough to knock the pen off the desk. Dispatch was checking in. I told them I'd found the tower lit. No sign of other hikers. No sign of power source. They asked if I'd be staying the night. I said no, and that's when the lights went out. All at once. No flicker, no fade, just gone. The room dropped into pitch, the kind of dark that feels like it's pressing on your skin. Then the softest creak. From the bottom of the tower, I drew my sidearm back toward the corner and waited. Creak, then another. Footsteps, slow, climbing, but I never heard the hatch open, and no one came through. Just silence again, heavy, watching. I flicked on my headlamp. The beam caught the desk. The fire log was closed, and a new page was open, clean, except for one word, stay. I left, ran down the stairs faster than I'd like to admit. Didn't stop until I hit the trailhead, didn't look back. Here's where it gets worse. Back at my truck, I opened the dispatch app to log the incident. The timestamp for my check-in at the tower was missing, not corrupted, gone, but a new entry had appeared, same night, logged by my device, same ID, no threat detected, tower operational, remaining overnight. And then, another signature, my name, again, except I never typed it. I told myself it was a glitch. Maybe someone spoofed the call log. Maybe the lights were battery rigged. That's what I needed to believe, until a week later, I got a package, no return address. Inside, a single notebook. Old forestry issue, same kind they stocked in towers back in the 70s. Moldy leather binding. Inside were dozens of entries, sloppy, panicked, disjointed, but the last 10 pages were in my handwriting, my real handwriting, but I hadn't written them. Each entry described things I hadn't seen, but almost had. It talked about figures in the clearing, trees closing in, the face in the mirror that isn't you. Then the last page, you left, but you didn't leave alone. Since then, lights flicker in my apartment, not often, just sometimes, always when I'm alone. I've started hearing steps in places I know are empty, soft ones, like someone pacing in socked feet, right above my bedroom ceiling. I live on the top floor. Last week I went back to my logbook. I flip through it sometimes, to make sure I'm still real, still me. But now, in the back, there's a page I never wrote. It says, Tower 7 activated, observer compliant, and beneath it, my name. I worked the tower at Buckeye Hollow during the winter season of 2018. West Virginia, Greenbrier County, the far end of the Monongahela. Closest town was Rennick, but the tower sat north of that, tucked above the hollow like a loose tooth in the jawline of the forest. The tower itself was old, pre-1970s construction, a steel skeleton bolted into shale, access only by foot or snowcat, depending on the weather. There was no electricity, no running water, no cell reception, just a propane heater, a field radio, and a rotary landline that hadn't been connected since before I was born, or so I'd been told. I was 36 then, divorced, working off a contract with the U.S. Forest Service that I honestly wasn't sure I wanted to renew. I'd spent most of my adult life on fire lines, trail crews, wilderness survey teams. This was my first solo watch. 8 weeks. Winter rotation. Nothing fancy. Just keep an eye out for unauthorized burns or smoke plumes. Make your notes. Stay sane. I liked it at first. The cold was dry and clean. The mornings had that blue hush to them that makes you feel like you're the last person alive. The woods down near Buckeye Hollow were always heavy with fog, just after sunrise. I'd sit with coffee, log the weather, and watch the mist move like breath between the trees. But starting around week 2, the routine changed. The tower had a landline, mounted to the wall behind the log desk. I was told it was left over from before the radio system was upgraded. Not functional, no dial tone. But then one night, just past 2 a.m. it rang. Old school rotary chime, loud, sharp, piercing through the quiet like it belonged there. I froze, waited, then picked it up. No voice, no static, no background noise, just the clear, unmistakable sound of a match being struck. Then, after a pause, then nothing. I sat there holding the phone long after the line went dead, eventually chalked it up to a crossed signal, maybe old wiring, or a trick of sound, until the next night, same time, 2:03 a.m., same ring, same sound, strike, whisper, don't let it spread. This went on for 5 nights in a row, always at 2:03, always the same phrase, always the same match. By the 6th night, I'd stopped answering, just let it ring. It'd stop after 3 chimes. But then, on night 8, I picked up again, and I said something back. I don't remember exactly what I said, something like, "What do you mean?" or "Who is this?" The line hissed, then silence, and the call never came again. Not the next night, not the night after that, but other things started changing. I woke up that first morning after speaking to the voice, on the ground, outside the tower, face down in the frost. No boots, no gloves. My feet were numb, hands covered in black smears, soot or ash, smelled like smoke. The tower door was wide open, but the inside untouched. Nothing burned, heater cold, mug still half full on the desk, and the logbook, the entry for that day was already filled in. My handwriting, my pen, but I hadn't written it. All it said was, "It started in the trees. We didn't stop it last time." I don't know how to explain what happened next except to say that time stopped feeling linear. The weather didn't track right. There was a stretch where it snowed for 3 days straight, and when I checked the barometer, it was showing high pressure. Clear skies. One morning, I watched the sun rise twice. Same orange band, same clouds, same exact motion, and I started seeing smoke that didn't leave a trace, a gray wisp rising between the poplars. I'd radio it in, hike down, nothing, no smell, no heat, no burn scar, but the tower would smell faintly like sulfur when I returned, like something had burned nearby, and on the cabin wall, above the cot, I found a fingerprint, small, blackened, as if made by a child's hand dipped in ash. I tried to leave, hiked down the ridge trail, planned to catch a signal near the ridge to call dispatch, But the trail didn't end where it should have. After an hour, I came out at the north face instead of the southern switchbacks, like the woods had spun around me, while I wasn't looking. Back in the tower, I flipped through the old logs. There were entries dating back to 1982. Most were normal, until I found a handful from 94. Right around this same time of year, the writing got erratic, tighter, like someone scribbling while cold or panicked. Phone rang again, heard the match, told her I understood, woke up outside, saw fire in the hollow, but no burn. Hands are black again. I think I carried something back. Don't let it spread. Don't let it spread. Don't let. The next page was torn out. A week before my rotation ended, the whisper came back, not on the phone, in my ear. While I slept, I woke to the feeling of warm breath on my cheek, soft voice, barely audible, just 2 words, too late. That same morning, the entire eastern tree line looked wrong. The trunks were leaning, ever so slightly toward the tower, like they'd shifted in the night. And at the base of the fire escape stairs, carved into the snowpack, were footprints, tiny, bare, burned at the edges, like someone had walked through coals. I lasted 2 more days. Then I hiked out, didn't wait for a vac. I walked until I found a ranger station, told them I had a family emergency, didn't care what it looked like, never went back. 6 months later, I got a manila envelope in the mail, no return address. Inside was a single page, torn from a fire log, old yellow paper. At the top, Buckeye Hollow Tower, February 1994, and at the bottom, my full name, signed in my handwriting. Next to it, a burned child's fingerprint, pressed right over the word, spread. I was halfway through my 3rd rotation when the man showed up. It was late September 2021. I was working a tower on the Kentucky side of the Jefferson National Forest, up near Breaks Interstate Park, just outside of Elkhorn City. Locals called it Redding Tower, though I've never found an official map that labeled it. The trailhead starts off an old service road about a mile past Lavisa Fork. You can't even see the tower until you're 20 yards from the base. Thick pine everywhere, dead quiet. I took the job because I needed the solitude. 2 months prior, my brother died unexpectedly. Aneurysm, no warning, just gone. We were twins, and when you lose a twin, people stop looking at you the same. They stare too long, trying to find the other half in your face. So I volunteered for a full rotation, 9 weeks. No visitors, at least that was the plan. The tower was sturdy, rusty, but stable. You had to climb 37 steps to reach the cabin. Inside cot, propane heater, stovetop, desk, binoculars, a field phone, no internet, barely any signal, no electricity, except the battery bank wired to a solar slab nailed to the tin roof. I liked it that way. Each morning, I logged weather, wind, fire risk, and terrain visibility. Routine. By evening, I'd watch the fog slip through the hollows like a living thing. It was quiet, still, simple, until day 19. I remember the time exactly. 3:42 p.m. I was at the desk, logging a weather inversion I'd spotted over Lavisa Knob. That's when I heard footsteps on the stairs. Not an animal, not wind, steel treads groaning under the weight of something heavy, deliberate. I moved to the hatch, unlatched it. The man was standing 3 steps down, holding something in both hands. He looked wrong. Ragged flannel shirt, jeans stiff with dust and sap, shoes falling apart at the seams, sunburned face, lips cracked, his eyes, wide, glassy, like he hadn't slept in days. He didn't say a word, just lifted a small bundle, wrapped in red and gray flannel, and held it out like an offering. I didn't take it. I asked who he was. No response, just a slight push upward with the bundle, like he needed me to take it. So I did, and then he turned and went back down the stairs. Didn't speak, didn't look back. When I got to the window, he was already gone. No sign of a vehicle, no motion in the woods, just gone. The bundle was lighter than I expected. Inside, a set of 3 brass keys on an old lanyard, Forest Service issue, and a Polaroid photo. I remember just staring at it for a while, not fully processing. The image was of me, asleep, lying on the cot, inside the tower cabin, this cabin, same angle, same sheets. My watch was visible on the nightstand. I even recognized the paperback I'd left face down on my chest. But here's the thing, I live alone, and I always bolt the door from the inside before I sleep. There's only one way up, only one hatch. It was locked, and yet there I was, clear as day, asleep in bed, photographed from inside the cabin. I didn't sleep that night. Checked every inch of the cabin, unscrewed the vent grills, pulled up floorboards. I even used the mirror to check behind the ceiling insulation panels. Nothing. No signs of a camera, no peephole, no disturbance to the solar rig, no footprints, no scent. But around 3 a.m., I heard movement outside, not footsteps, breathing, long, uneven, just outside the hatch. I sat with my back to the wall, holding the axe we kept for splitting kindling. The breathing never stopped, just stayed at the edge of hearing. Then at exactly 3:42, same as the day before, it stopped. Next morning, I checked the hatch again, locked from the inside, like always. But when I stepped onto the landing, I saw something caught in the railing. Another photograph, same angle, same image of me, asleep in bed. But this time, my eyes were open. I radioed it in, tried to stay calm, but I told them someone had come into the tower, told them I had photos I hadn't taken. The dispatcher didn't say much, just asked for my location, time of report, and then, in a voice I didn't recognize, said, "Don't give it back, that's all." Then the radio cut out, just static. I tried to call again, nothing. I changed frequencies, rechecked the battery bank. Everything should have worked, but it didn't. That afternoon, I took the keys down into the woods. I walked to the maintenance shed a few hundred yards south of the tower, the one that had been padlocked shut since before I arrived. None of my current keys worked on it, but one of those keys, the brass ones from the man's bundle, fit the lock. It clicked open, like it had been waiting. Inside, dust, cobwebs, rotten wood, and another photograph, nailed to the far wall with a square-headed iron tack. It showed my brother, taken from behind, walking into the tree line near the Lavisa Fork overlook. The photo was dated October 1999, the year before I took my first trail job, the year he vanished for 3 weeks, and never told me why. That night, I sat with the photo in my lap, until the sun went down. I kept expecting a call, a knock, another visitor. Instead, I heard something else, wood creaking, but not the stairs. The walls, like the beams inside the tower frame, were under strain, or listening. And when I finally drifted off, just before dawn, I had a dream I can't forget. I was in the tower, watching myself sleep, myself, on the cot, but the thing on the bed wasn't me. It had my face, my hands, but it was smiling. After that, things got strange. I started waking up in different clothes, found pine needles in my socks, even though I hadn't left the tower. One morning, I found a fresh cup of coffee on the desk, steam still rising, but I hadn't made it, and the fire log pages started filling themselves out, written in my handwriting, but things I hadn't seen, things that hadn't happened. Don't let him back in. He remembers where the key is now. Stop sleeping. That's when it trades places. By the end of week 4, I was broken. I didn't trust myself, didn't trust my hands, or the mirror, or the man in the photos, because I wasn't sure it was me anymore. I tried burning the keys, wouldn't catch. Tried burying the photos. They showed up the next morning, tucked inside my boots. I left the tower the next morning, without logging my exit. Never went back. I live in Tennessee now, small apartment, no windows facing east. I keep all my lights on at night. Haven't taken a photograph of myself in over a year. But the worst part is this. 3 nights ago, I got a manila envelope in the mail. No return address, just my name, no postage. Inside was a photograph, me, asleep, taken from inside this apartment. I worked a tower route across western North Carolina for nearly 11 years, rotating watch stations was part of the job, especially during the dry seasons, spring through late fall. You'd get reassigned every few weeks, covering different elevations, different terrain, mostly the same pattern though. Early mornings, fire watch, log entries, weather reports, solitude, broken only by the occasional supply drop or shortwave check-in. For the most part, I liked the work. It's the kind of job that draws a certain type of person. You either thrive in the silence, or it eats you alive. For me, it always felt like breathing room, until I drew the tower at Millstone Ridge. Millstone sits out past the Blue Ridge Parkway, just beyond the Pisgah boundary. If you go too far west, you're in Tennessee. Too far north, you hit the Virginia line. It's wedged between 3 counties, tucked up in a fold of hills no one really visits. The locals don't even call it by name. When I first mentioned it to the guy at the dispatch station in Asheville, he looked at me sideways and said, "That one's still open." At the time I laughed, said guess I drew the short straw. He didn't laugh back. I hiked in early September, 2020. The air smelled like dry moss and rusted iron. Everything was brittle. The leaves, the twigs, even the wind felt sharp. The tower itself was structurally sound, but barely. 40 feet up, thin steel frame, paint long faded. The hatch creaked like it hadn't been opened in years. Inside was basic: cot, desk, stove top, radio set, logbook. No power, no insulation, just open slats for windows, and a ladder you climbed up and down every day. But the first night, something felt off. I went to bed around 10, bolted the hatch, shut the storm flap, and laid down on the cot, facing east, always east, so I'd wait to the sunrise. But that morning, I woke up facing the ladder, my back to the sunrise. The cot hadn't moved, but I had. I was on my side, head turned toward the hatch. Didn't think much of it at first. Rolled over, checked the logs, made coffee. Night 2, same thing. And on night 3, I was so sure I'd catch myself in the act. I set a trail camera on a tripod, aimed at the cot, the kind we use for tracking wildlife. Infrared, motion triggered, time-stamped. When I reviewed the footage the next morning, there were 2 things wrong. First, the camera had triggered between 2:13 and 2:14 a.m. It took 3 photos. Second, all 3 photos were blank, not blurry, not overexposed, just pitch black. The logs showed normal wind speed, no fog, no lightning, just void. That night, I bolted the hatch shut, tight, 4 steel bolts, 2 deadlocks. It took nearly 10 minutes to secure everything. Then I laid on the cot, facing east, flashlight and knife by my side. I stayed awake as long as I could, listened to the wind, took note of every creak. But at some point, I must have drifted, because I woke up with my face inches from the hatch, bolts undone, door open. After that, I started leaving notes for myself, tiny things, scraps of paper, wedged under my water bottle, in my boots, between the pages of the logbook. You fell asleep, facing east, bolts were locked, do not descend ladder. Each morning, the notes were still there, but they stopped making me feel better, because one morning, I woke up with bloody knuckles, scrapes across both hands, fresh dirt under my nails, and a note, not one I wrote, stuck to the inside of the hatch. It said, "Halfway down." That was the day I stopped sleeping. I drank instant coffee until my hands shook, read old field logs, tried to call in, but the radio only gave back this thin insectile hum, like something pretending to be static. Around night 6, I gave in, let myself rest for what I thought was only a few minutes. Woke up barefoot, on the ladder, halfway down, knuckles raw, shirt soaked in sweat, and this part I remember with painful clarity. I wasn't climbing down the ladder when I woke up. I was climbing up, as if I had already been outside, as if I was returning from somewhere. I ran back into the cabin, slammed the hatch, and bolted everything twice. Threw the stove across the trapdoor, slept with the knife in one hand, and the radio mic in the other. Didn't sleep again that night. Didn't sleep the next night, either. And then, on what I think was night 8, the logs were gone. The notebook was still there, but the pages were different. The writing wasn't mine. It looked like mine. Same pen, same spacing, but the entries didn't match anything. I remembered. They talked about visitors, about waking up to whispers, about the man with the glass mouth, and over again, a phrase, "The climb is part of the forgetting." On the final page, dated the next day, a day that hadn't happened yet, there were just 4 words: "He won't stop now." I burned the notebook that night, tossed the ashes off the landing, watched the embers scatter over the trees like sparks, and that's when I saw it. A light, maybe 40 feet into the woods, too low for a plane, too white for a firefly, still, steady, then movement, not toward me, not away, just around, circling the base of the tower. I couldn't see a face, couldn't even swear it was a person, just a shape. And after a while, it stopped circling, and put one hand on. I barricaded the hatch with everything I had: table, cot, stove, my pack, anything heavy. Then I sat in the corner and waited. It never climbed, but I heard it, not just footsteps, breathing, slow, deliberate, like something just outside the door, learning my rhythm. And then I must have passed out again, because I woke up, not on the cot, not in the corner, but on the landing, barefoot, one hand on the ladder, the rest of me, already leaning forward. I don't take tower work anymore. I transferred to desk duty, 2 counties down, maps, weather models, data analysis. I lock my doors. I sleep with my back against the wall. But here's the thing, sometimes, I still wake up facing the door. No matter where I fall asleep, my body always turns to face the way out. And last week, I found a note tucked into the glove box of my truck, folded neatly, written in handwriting I still can't prove was mine. It said, "Don't check the ladder again. He knows you remember."